I'm Avi Freedman, CEO of a startup called Kentik, based in San Francisco in the United States. We do large-scale network analytics as a combination of network performance management and network-savvy business intelligence. I started the first ISP in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States in 1992, and have been in the internet infrastructure industry since then. I was at a company called AboveNet. It's changed names and sort of is AboveNet again. Now Zayo. I was at Akamai for 10 years. I was at Server Central. And the network management, understanding what's going on with the infrastructure and what it means to the business has been a challenge, basically since I started doing networking. So on Thursday, I'm going to tell people that the situation is snafu, that we've been in a sort of desperate situation with regards to understanding the infrastructure that makes the cars not go off the road and deliver the medicine of the world, but that there's hope, and talk about how it's important and possible now to use the data that comes off your infrastructure to make network as well as business planning decisions. The network data, if processed properly, can actually let you make business decisions in a few different areas. You've got the security posture of the infrastructure, which is what is the activity on the infrastructure talking to botnets, whether it's your backbone, whether it's your services if you're a web provider, whether it's the end users if you're an access provider. In fact, many cases, it's actually a revenue optimization, both who am I peering with that I'm sending traffic to that could become my customer, as well as what's the packet mile? How much does it actually cost me instead of divining and saying, I think this is how much I should charge, how much should I actually charge? And then, of course, the very classic planning and where do I put a POP. And then fourth, we see a lot of people creating services, a lot of service providers especially, that are tired of being in bit jail. So they can only charge based on access network or colo, and they want to make security or performance-based services on top. So classically, the network tools that people used were full of nerd knobs and really designed for practitioners. In the security realm, Splunk came along and said, look, you have all this data, we're going to roll it up and make it useful and make pretty pie charts for your bosses. So I think the practitioner first needs a platform that they can use where they get the nerd knobs and they can look at peering and project across AS path and all that, but that brings out and says, here's how much the network costs you. Here's how much risk you have from your own infrastructure as well as the customers downstream of you. Here's what the cost is as you try to optimize, and make it in a way that the CFO can understand, because the CFO doesn't understand BGP communities and AS paths and all that. So that's number one. Number two, the practitioners need to find a way to bridge the communication gap with, we call it the bosses, because you've got logging and metrics and APM and NPM and business intelligence tools, but fundamentally, if you're not providing them actionable data for them to go to their bosses, the board, and help them justify what they're doing and making better decisions, then you're just asking for budget without context. So the trick is, practitioner, find tools that help you, but that also help your bosses and help them as they talk to their bosses, who are ultimately representing the shareholders of the company. Today, we have a large customer cluster in Japan. And we're a 3-year-old startup, so difficult for us to penetrate everything in the Pacific. My experience actually, when I was more involved, was actually more in Australia, when I was crawling around the rooftops doing satellite-based bandwidth augmentation with Andrew Koo back in the 90s. So, right now, the challenge for a lot of U.S. companies as we work with networks in Asia Pacific is that it's very regionally, it's sort of sub-regionally based, right? And so where do you go? Well, we have a bunch of Australian customers, we have a bunch of Japanese customers, and then Singapore or Hong Kong, and you sort of have multiple areas you need to cover. But I follow in Australia the regulatory issues around data retention. Back in the 90s, there was craziness about content filtering. I'm sure, well, actually every few years, the Tasmanian Devils get active and talk about that. So really only at a distance do I follow. I would just say that I've probably been to, I don't know, 30 or 40 nanogs. I've been to RIPE 10 or 15 times. This is my first time at APRICOT. And I think what's impressive is the spirit of sharing and trying to grow together as a community and move forward is very similar. probably a little bit more structurally similar to Ripe because you've got the registry and the community, but very impressive and welcoming so far.